Okay, it being 7:15, why don't we get this meeting started? Let me share the agenda for this evening. Do you know what? I'm going to share that, and that should be easier. Okay. The agenda for tonight is this is our regular meeting, though we do have some additional items to discuss. I would like to make 2 changes to the agenda. The first one that I would like to propose is that we postpone the approval of the minutes to another meeting. Since we have quite a few things on our agenda that we have to get through tonight, I would rather spend the time on those things and push off the approval of the minutes.
I would agree.
Okay.
It's priority.
I think I need a motion to do that.
Motion to change the agenda to remove the approval of the minutes for 5 meetings and to have them at our next scheduled meeting.
Can I ask that if you make an amendment to that and not say the next meeting, but at a future meeting, just because we may have another meeting depending on the referendum kind of thing, whatever makes.
To amend my motion to say at the next
Appropriate meeting.
appropriate meeting.
Then I'll keep my second on that.
Okay. Since we are all here, I'm just going to say all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So we will delay the approval of the minutes for another time. The second change that I would like to, make to the agenda is to add an item under new business to consider and possibly act on setting a temporary mill rate. Being that the referendum did not pass and that our fiscal year is coming to an end, in order to get a tax bill out, we need to set a temporary mill rate so that the tax bills can go out. So I would like to add that to the agenda as well. If I could have a motion to add that.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Ross seconds it. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Okay. And any abstentions? Okay, so 6 ayes and 1 nay, Alex. Very good. Those are the only 2 changes that I have to the agenda. So let's move to public participation. If we have anybody online or in the room that would like to comment on anything. Yes, if you could please state your name and address so that for our minutes, that would be appreciated.
Sure. My name is Laura Edwards. I'm at 93 Bolton Road. I listened to your last Board of Finance meeting online.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for providing that. And I heard your frustration about not knowing why people were voting one way or the other on the budget. So I went online to see how I could communicate how I voted, and I didn't see a way to do that. So I don't know whether it's a town policy or not, but there's no email address for the Board of Finance to communicate that. And being a person that tries to limit my social media presence,
Fair enough.
don't feel comfortable in doing that on social media. So I just kind of want to make that recommendation.
Can I make one comment? I do know that each one of us has an individual.
It's not posted.
I will look.
Some of us have also lost our email, the getting logged on, I believe, correct? Doesn't it? If you haven't used
If
it.
you didn't set up multi-factor authentication, you would have not been allowed in the system.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to know. I will look into that. I will tell you that I am ebradley@boltonct.org.
Okay.
So.
Thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to comment on, and it may be more appropriate for the Board of Education meeting, but the Board of Education, which comprises most of your budget, does not include packet information like the town does. I noticed that the town has a packet that you can click on and see what's going to be discussed at the meeting, but the Board of Ed does not include that. So when you're looking at the Board of Education information and you're reading the minutes and it refers to as attached, you can't see what's being presented to the board. So I would highly recommend that the Board of Education start including that information just as the town does, so that it's more transparent as to what it is they are discussing. And just a minor little detail, in looking at the budget, some of your narratives don't match to your numbers, and I'm sure there's a lot of changes that are going on really fast when you're making these changes. But when you look at page 5 and then look at the narrative that supports, for instance, the Board of Education on page 6, the numbers don't jive. And the same thing goes with the town proper budget on page 10. So I'm not sure what your constituents are looking at, but they're going to look at the narrative and see a 2.62% increase on the Board of Ed. It's really a 2.26. When you do the numbers.
Jill, did you want to question or comment?
When you go further, I guess I'd have to look, I don't have it in front of me, but so let me pull it up so that I can understand better what. But the original, some of the information is the original budget, original requests, but when you get into the numbers, that's when they match up. And because I don't know where the Board of Ed or the town is cutting from, the original numbers have to stay in there. But if you go further back in the document, you'll find the correct number when it's grouped together with all the other information of where each part comes from. It stays the original number because I don't know where the cuts are coming from. But when you see it just grouped in those 5 numbers, the capital, the debt, Board of Ed, town, those numbers are the numbers that including the cuts. But I can pull up the budget document and see what
So
we're.
I'll give you a, for instance, if you go to page 6 on the.
Wait a minute, I gotta get to it first. 1 second.
Say, do I have?
If somebody could share it up on the screen for our benefit.
That is what I'm.
Let's see, they don't.
And I don't mean to nitpick, I just.
No, it's.
No,
No, this
it's
is great
very
feedback.
good point,
Yeah.
'cause we need to.
Do I have?
It's pulled off the website, so I can't get it there. Let me take mine.
And the document I have in front of me was what was available at the election site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets removed immediately after the
June.
referendum. That's not on the ballot.
Right,
And we don't move on.
because we don't have a number yet. Um, Yeah, I've got the one for referendum 2, but I don't think I have the one for referendum
Yeah,
3.
I don't mean to delay the meeting, and I can certainly. show it to you.
Well, if you don't mind, if I would be happy to look at it at the end and get the specifics, because obviously if there's an error, we want to fix that. And you are very correct in that usually we are trying to turn around these very quickly because the referendum vote is soon and we need to get the documents published and out there and whatever.
Yep.
And there's a whole lot of information in there. So, but yes, if you see anything, I would very much like to know what it is. Yes.
I'd just like to comment on your earlier comment about the information that comes out on the town side, but not necessarily on the Board of Education side. I believe it's by statute that the Board of Ed is not required to provide line item stuff to the town.
I understand that, but if you, as a citizen, if you want to go and understand what's in the Board of Ed, what's in the Board of Ed meetings in general, they don't provide a packet of what it is they're talking about. So if you want to, when it references a budget transfer, it's going to say as presented. But you don't know what as presented is because it's not available online.
Mm.
Okay.
Well, I think Rhea, who's on the Board of Education, is on this call, so I can follow up with or I can take it to Superintendent Hecht. I know Superintendent Hecht could not be here tonight. She had another prior commitment, so
And I will try to make that meeting tomorrow night to raise the same point.
very good. That was going to be my suggestion. Bring it to the Board of Education meeting and you're already on top of that, so.
Okay, so page 6 is the original budget. That's the original information, though that does not change. It talks about the Board of Ed,
Oh, that's their original ask.
right?
Okay.
That won't change.
So Rhea, I see your hand is up.
Yes, I would just like to say that I will certainly talk to Superintendent Hecht, and I know exactly what what's being discussed, and I would be very happy to speak to her about that and ask whether or not we can have a packet that the public can see prior to the meetings.
And I think also post meeting. So as you know, retrospectively, what was it that was presented?
Right. Okay, will do. I will certainly do that.
Laura, first off, I thank you so much for coming. I mean, it really does mean a lot to have the feedback. So thank you very much and for bringing up excellent points and clearly very well thought out. It is greatly appreciated.
We value input
Mhm.
and we get so little of it. So Charlie, yes.
I want to comment on one of our other concerns too about not being able to locate email addresses easily. And you're not the first I've heard you say that. That sometimes it's difficult to go to the town websites and determine any email addresses for anybody. So that's something that I've suggested in the past we have to look at as far, not for the board, but for the town to look at in order to get that information out so that it's more easily understood by the taxpayer to be able to get it from the website. So
Because I've gone to other towns' websites and they just have directories of personnel by department, board, commission, and so forth.
and they list the name of the
Name,
and
and email address, and their phone number if they have one that's available.
So maybe we can, in a, different form, talk about how we might be able to do something like that. So,
Mhm.
and the second follow-up was, for members of our board who are locked out, unlocking those.
Yeah.
So, because that's an issue. I'm just curious, members of the board, who is having issues with their emails? So,
If they didn't sign up when we all had to when Graham went around and we had to do that whole thing. If you didn't do it then you don't have an email address right now, or it's not working. We had to go through that whole process. Yes.
Say is a true statement, but no one ever told me that this was happening. I never received an email, a snail mail, anything on the town website that said, we are going to be changing our email servers and authentication. Here's what you need to do to get ready. So that's why I don't have one.
But Ross, I think that it went to your email. You had problems. You weren't able to get into it. Graham doesn't have everybody's personal email address, so it went to your town email address, which could be the problem,
Well, then.
that you never received it.
Problem that you didn't get to me.
Right. But
we will work
Graham
on it.
didn't have everybody's personal email address. And I have everybody's personal email address because that's what you prefer for me to send your information to you, but he doesn't. And it just to tell you why that happened.
So, I got it on my list. So was there anything else that you wanted to add? Didn't want to cut you off. Okay, very well.
Would you like to hear any of the comments at this point that I heard?
Yes, I would like the comments
So basically, when I was at the polls, I was the moderator for voting, which means I was responsible for overall how the voting gets done, the actual execution. And so I would hear people coming out to our poll workers, particularly the checker and the ballot clerk, and they would be saying, "What are you people doing to us?" I heard a couple of very loud people talking to the poor poll workers and saying what they should be saying here. And they were saying, "You people, you don't appreciate how we don't have any money. You don't appreciate this, you don't appreciate that," and being quite loud. And I would go up to them and say, "You're talking to the wrong people. These people don't set the rates, don't set the mill rate. They don't have anything to do with the budget." I said, "If anybody is at least touching that process," I said, "it's me. So I'm on Board of Finance. So why don't you go vote? And then you and I can go outside, where no one else can hear us, and we'll talk about this." As I said, I have to put on my other hat. I have to take off my moderator hat and then put on my Board of Finance, and we'll have to do that outside. And so I had a conversation with a couple of them, some people, and the general concerns were inflation, their grocery bills, going higher from week to week, fuel bills in particular. And that was very much the same thing. And then I said, "That's really very good, but how come you haven't sent any emails to the town? You haven't come to any of our meetings?" And they said, "Well, no one will listen to us, and you'll have to sit there for hours before you get to us." I said, "Public comment is right at the beginning, and you can certainly speak to that." "Well, no one's going to listen." I said, "No one will listen to you, myself included, if you do not say anything, because we do not hear you. We do not know what you're thinking. We are not mind readers." And so I invited them to come, and I do not see them here. So there were at least half dozen that I invited, and I said, "You've made some very good points, and it would be very good for the Board of Finance to hear directly from you." I promised them I would relay what they said. And I said, "But, if there's any questions back to me for explanations or clarification about what you said, I won't be able to give that because I do not know what goes on inside your head, or, how you may rethink something when you get asked a question." So I just wanted to relay the feedback. It was really just concerns about just things that are really touching them, their pocketbooks, touching them very directly.
Mhm.
And so just did my duty to relay that, and I did my other duty to invite them, and for whatever reason, they have chosen not to show up. And so I hope they're listening, because keeping my word to them, and that's it. Because I can't do anything more if they don't come and say it themselves. And I said it has a lot more weight to it when they come themselves and say it, particularly before we've deliberated on a subject.
Thank you.
So I'm just, passing it on as I promised them I would.
Has anybody else gotten any comments from townspeople that they would like to share?
Just a few things from both sides. People don't understand why people aren't voting. I mean, that seems to be this ongoing thing. I will say, and throw this out there, there have been this last time, I don't know if anybody else noticed, but there were people, just residents in town, that put a "vote today" signs, which
That's awesome.
you did it. Thank you. So we had those additional signs. It did not go unnoticed. I certainly noticed them.
People actually comment, that's another point, they did comment favorably on those nice bright pink signs.
Yes.
So, yes.
So,
Okay.
That
thank
was
you.
Possible for the vote.
Impressed with the bright color that doesn't match anything.
So it was noticed. That was definitely noticed. And also just there have been a few citizens, once on, I believe Amanda Gordon has been trying to put up, "Hey, vote today" on social media. And people have said that that has been helpful. But again, I think it's just, we're missing still a segment. And I saw those pink signs, and I thought they were bright and
Mhm.
loud. So I don't know. People are scratching their heads why others aren't getting out there. And the silence, again, going back to Ross's point, like, just tell us why, give us a reason, so we know how to act. And yeah, so that's about it.
Any other comments? I do have a couple. So I did put a post out on Facebook with basically an excerpt from the budget document. And I can read you some of the comments. It says, I don't like the way the $2.99 per week increase was stated in a weekly amount instead of the annual amount. We don't pay taxes by the week, so it should have just been stated as 155.48 a year. I also don't see a sustainment forecast. Do we always just increase taxes regardless if the economy is good or bad? It would be nice to see a sustainable plan, because at some point that reduces taxes as opportunity changes throughout the years. The retired folks in this town that are on a fixed income will not be able to maintain their finances if everything routinely goes up every year. I don't have the answers, just a viewpoint of the elderly or retired persons that have contributed to the health of this town for their entire lives. We can't incrementally tax them to the poorhouse by year-over-year increases. So that was one comment. Second comment was, personally, I'm still so confused on how to vote. I have 4 kids in the school system and love it, but fear we can't possibly have any more cuts and expect to hold on to teachers so our kids get a great education. On the other hand, being a single mom, I fear the expense and increase of everything and wonder how many of us are going to manage anymore. I feel for all of us, but especially our children and seniors as they're being affected the most. No one is going to stay as teachers. No one is going to stay as teachers, as we are losing so many already and going to other towns. Where does this stop? How does this stop? Love our little town, but we really need help somehow. So those are the 2 posts that were on Facebook that directly that I saw. I am sure that there are probably many, many other posts that I didn't see. And I know I also limit my social media. So it was fairly unusual for me to post anything, but so those were 2 other comments that came out that we can, as we get into further things. Any other comments? Otherwise, we will move on with our agenda.
I would say that in speaking to, again, both sides, we got some individuals most individuals are saying, look, it's the economy stupid. So I think when we started this conversation a while back in this process, we were looking at a pretty bad economy. And I think as we keep getting into the process, we're looking towards a recession. That's what all the indicators are saying now. That's what our townsfolk are looking at as well. So I think it goes to that budget. How do we budget? How do you budget your household budget and plan for these things while you are going to have an additional uncertain number from the town, and it's hard, and so most people are hurt. And I went to different get-togethers that back in the day were a good amount of folks in town. We had half the people showing, so that says a lot. So the other thing, people are still concerned. Directly told me they were concerned about the teachers leaving. And also, some individuals were asking the question, well, how big is our classroom size? Some people did comment on classroom size compared to other towns. Perhaps we have, less students to teacher ratio. So that was an interesting conversation. I don't have children in the system anymore, but my nieces and nephews are in the system as well. So we heard that as well. So, and then we just had other people that really wanted to become more involved in the town. But as they mentioned, there are ways to contact us. There's different things that we need to do as a town to become more technology, friendly, I guess. And so a lot of people are using social media. They utilize emails, and they want to be able to contact folks. And sometimes they can't because they have to work. So if you're a business owner, you might be up early as 5 a.m. and you might be out as late as 10 p.m. So getting out to vote is very difficult for those folks. So that's all I heard. So, but again, I think my biggest concern right now is that we're in a different place and we're looking at recession now. So I think that people are very concerned about it because everything is going up.
Which the town is feeling
Exactly.
equally.
Mhm.
So we're feeling it individually. The town is feeling it. You know, their fuel bill, their supplies bill is just that much larger because it's bigger. Okay. Any other comments? Thank you, Alex. Thank you, everybody. Then let us move on to the rest of our agenda. Let's go through our standard reports. I would like to do this somewhat quickly so that we can, oh, really, sorry. Okay, so the first report that we are going to go through is tax collection. And does anybody have any questions or comments or concerns? Okay. Then I'm going to move on. If people are okay with this, I know we're coming to the end of the fiscal year. I will move on to revenues. Is there anything on the revenue side, any surprises, any changes from last month that we should be concerned about? Anything that we were expecting that we're to get and we haven't or won't? Those are big ones at this point.
I have a question about the for education. Well, no, actually total state. So we're at 66.63%. Very low. Are we
That's
expecting?
on grants for the town. That's the percentage that we're at for grants for the town.
Okay, do we need to worry about that, Jill? Are we?
No, nothing in there, actually, everything. We did receive the municipal projects that always come in June. We did receive that. We have received pretty much the way it is, we have received everything that we're going to get and with no problems. And I don't know if Jim and I shared last month with you, but we did receive an additional $14,000 from FEMA for the grant, for a FEMA grant that we got for the storm back in August of, was it 19, Jim?
Yeah, I see, it's,
Right. We did receive a large chunk of money already, and then they came back and gave us an additional $14,000 on top of that, which was a nice surprise.
That is a nice surprise.
Yeah.
Is that in here or not?
I don't,
think so.
I don't think so. I think it came in June.
Okay,
We have received that.
last week.
okay.
Okay,
So
all right. Thanks, Jill.
you're welcome.
Any other questions, comments on revenues?
So I have a question for that grant you mentioned. Does that affect the emergency management budget?
The FEMA grant? Does it
No.
affect the emergency management budget? No.
Affected meaning, I guess I don't understand what you mean by me. Does it affect it?
That's a reimbursement
That's a reimbursement?
for
Right,
that the town's
that's correct.
for the cleanup and all the services.
We had a presidential declaration after that. And originally, I think the reimbursement for our expenses, which you have to track, is somewhere around 70%. And the Congress voted to increase that percentage to 90%. So we got an additional appropriation of about $14,000 was a little over 14,000. And that gets deposited into the general fund.
Thank you.
But that isn't a regular emergency management. That has nothing to do with that grant. That's a part of the emergency management salary, which is totally different from that particular grant.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Then if nothing else, I will move on to expenditures. And as usual, usually you highlight things. There are two that are on here, fire marshal and waste collection. So if somebody would care to share.
So in the fire marshal's budget, we transferred or allocated $6,000 for toward capital improvement. Because we have a brush truck that is being purchased through a FEMA grant, and we had a matching piece, and the fire department said they were out of money, so we were able to find funds within the fire marshal's budget to cover that piece. That's what the blue highlight is, and the yellow highlight is for waste collection, and we have a shortfall about $15,000. We will have or will be moving money around to make sure that that is covered.
Can I ask the shortfall, the reason for it? Was it having to do with
The cost of waste collection.
just the cost?
Is just exorbitant, and a lot of it has to do with where the trash has to go to be disposed of these days. I mean, it used to be that we would take the trash directly to Hartford to mirror it, and that is closed or closing. And of course, there's fuel surcharges.
Mhm.
All of those issues are coming to bear.
Very good. I wasn't sure if it had anything to do with, I know we've had issues with our recycling not being clean, and so we've had sort of fees.
We've not seen any fines as a result of that.
Okay.
So they do audit that on occasion. We've been working on negotiating our trash contract with All American Waste. So we actually have two trash contracts, right? One is with Willie Waste for our bulky waste that, all of you drop off at the transfer station and so on and so forth. And the other is for the trash collection that gets picked up at your homes from All American Waste. And All American Waste does do, the audit on occasion. And when we met with them recently, they said that there had not been any concerns in a while. So that's a good question, and I'm happy to report that at the moment, as a community, we're doing pretty well.
Well, that's good. Any other questions on expenditures?
I just note that, some of the bills we haven't gotten, yet, right?
Mhm.
I mean, we haven't gotten, fourth quarter billing from the state police and things like that. So, these numbers seem pretty high right now, but there's gonna be a fair bit of expenses that are still yet to come in and be paid. We're almost at the end of the month, but we don't have all the bills yet.
Yeah, the resident state trooper bill, we get quarterly overtime bills, but for their over $300,000 bill, we only get that at the very end of the fiscal year. So that will be a big chunk of money coming out of there. And that's not in the encumbrance. That's not encumbered either, because we don't know the exact number.
Those bills yet, so we can't encumber
Well,
them.
the other thing that's happening with the state troopers is we had a lapse in coverage for a period of time with troopers being transferred out to other locations and other jobs. And then the other thing that's happened is, one of the troopers that we have currently, it isn't paid at the same rate as the senior trooper that we had that left. So that'll be, those things will be reflected in that, that accounting that we get at the end.
Someone asked me this, about that. So this is due to the fact that that more senior trooper is of a higher rank and probably more time in service than the
Correct.
current
Yep.
trooper.
Yep.
Okay. good.
Okay, anything else on that? Okay, then what I would like to do is go through the transfers. So the May and June transfers. I did have, I did have a question. I noticed in last month's list of transfers that Jill put up, and then also on this month's list of transfers, many things going from various places within the fire department to purchase scuba bottles and fire hoses, nozzles, whatever they are. And I sort of recall from during the budget discussions, during the detailed budget workshops, that there was a plan in place to stagger purchasing of the scuba equipment over the next several years. But I see lots of things to purchase scuba equipment. So has that plan changed? Does anybody know?
So I did have a conversation with the chief about this, because you had asked a couple of meetings ago the same question, and I said, please explain this to me so that I can, give that information when it's asked. And what he said is that he is trying to use the funds that he has in this year's budget to start getting into that plan sooner rather than waiting till next year, so that this evens out, 1 year sooner. Because what's happened is that, the SCBA bottles have been purchased, kind of in bulk.
Mhm.
We got a grant and we got a whole bunch of them at one time. We got a fire truck and we got a group of SCBA bottles with the fire truck. And, with the cost, as we discussed during the budget process, we really like to, instead of having peaks and valleys, we'd like to even that out. So what he is attempting to do is basically to get some extras in the mix now, so that when he hits it, when he gets 15 bottles that all of a sudden have to be replaced, he's not having to replace 15 bottles because he's purchased ahead of time and isn't trying to bridge the gap at one moment in time.
Okay, so he is still going for a replacement cycle, like we cycle through computers and laptops and other equipment, where he's just trying to front load it some
Right. And it's
by
not-
purchasing, and
this
I
is-
apologize, I called them scuba, I guess they're SCBA. I don't know what they are. but-
Self-contained breathing apparatus.
See, to me, I'm a scuba diver, so that says scuba, but that's okay.
Like scuba tanks, they have a fixed lifespan. And
Yes.
they have to be pressure tested regularly, and so they go, I don't know if it's 10 years or whatever, but they have to be replaced at a certain point, so that's what it's.
So his thought is that buying, essentially some now, when he gets to the point where he's got the 15, well, he's got more in the mix, so maybe he's only got to replace 8 instead of 15 in that year. And what I've asked him to do is to actually create a plan, identify the number of bottles. Each of them has a serial number, right? Use a spreadsheet, put the year, and really create a plan.
Mhm.
One of the things that we committed to on this side, which is similar but different, is, our computers, replacing computers. So we went around and did an inventory of every computer that's owned on the town side, not the Board of Ed. And we took their, make, model, serial number, and year, and, we looked at best practices for replacement. And we can actually tell you for the next 3 years what we plan on replacing it. And that's what I've asked him to do, is to create a similar.
I think that's just good practice for anything where you have many of a certain item. And, I would encourage them to do it not only for these SCBA's, but all of their equipment. What is it, and when it becomes damaged, it needs to get pulled out and replaced. So, it's good practice. Yes, Pam.
I was encouraged that they found that they had this money available to begin the process, because if we're looking at sliding into a recession, money's gonna get tighter. So I'd rather have it started earlier, because these are very essential pieces of equipment.
Mhm. One of the reasons why I asked is because I had thought we had put aside money in the budget for next year to do this. And my question was, do we now need that money in the budget for next year because we're sort of front loading this
We still need it for the next round.
for round 2? Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I do recall those discussions as well, and so I don't know if I ever recall that they were restricted from actually purchasing some of those pieces of equipment in this particular year. It was almost as if they would purchase them, they wouldn't purchase them in swoop. But I do think it's appropriate because it's a safety issue here.
Oh, I don't disagree. I just didn't realize that they were going to do that. And I saw these transfers come in and it startled me as to, I didn't think they were planning on doing that. So I just wanted to make sure I understood what the thought process was.
With that said, then my next question is this, so how much more of this is going to happen within the next year? Is this a bulk of the equipment we're talking about here?
No,
Okay, that's what I
It's
was,
still gonna be staggered.
just staggered. Okay,
It's
that's
just a little earlier start on beginning the process.
kind of the way I understood it, but okay, thank you.
One of the other thoughts actually that I had was that I'm afraid prices are gonna go up more dramatically. And so I was kind of glad they could get a little bit of a start and get a few of them out of the way.
Yes. Kristen, did you have a question?
Oh, well, it's moving on to another item. Are we ready to?
I'm ready to move on to another item.
So this is more of an observation that may be relevant for our later discussion when we're talking about reducing the budgets. I'm looking at the transfer of diesel and gasoline, where it looks like, and if I remember correctly, and Jill and Jim refresh my memory, I thought we had $5,000 left last discussion, and we knew that wasn't enough at all. And now it's 15,000. Is it fair to say that we're starting to see the direct consequences of the price and increase of diesel and starting to see that trickle down effect of what it costs the town?
we are.
Yes.
The good news is school buses are off the road at this point for the most part.
Yeah.
So, it will help for the next couple of months, but we're definitely feeling that crunch. And Jill has worked hard to try to do some forecasting to make sure that, we have enough for the balance of this fiscal year.
Yeah, it does leave me concerned when we're dealing with such a tight budget going into next year. And then looking at where it comes from tree trimming, that, we get some bad storms. Again, it's just an observation. It's just when we're going forward, having our discussion, I think also just putting it in context as to like where our money goes. We're seeing the effects of the economy and the increase in price.
So
Gas too.
if I could just add to that, and I understand that, tree trimming is a concern. And, unfortunately, Bolton, like every other town in Connecticut, has been hit pretty hard with the emerald ash borer, and, we're having some issues there. But our deputy tree warden, or second tree warden, while our tree warden was out, did go and do a complete survey of the town with another member of the highway department, and we have cut everything that we felt was necessary to cut within this year's budget. So I think we're in decent shape. It doesn't mean if we get a hurricane or a post-tropical depression,
Yep.
that we're not going to have some issues. But fortunately, we do have still a reasonably robust tree trimming budget for next year. And I'll also say that Eversource has been a pretty good partner as of late. We've brought a couple things to their attention that were, power line entangled kind of things. And they've come right out and taken care of it pretty quickly at no cost to the town when those things happen. So we're gonna endeavor to try to work with them even a little more carefully, strongly, however you want to do it.
No,
to
I
take advantage of
support.
those relationships.
Yeah, no, I support the choice of where the funds came from, but I think just putting it in context with the price and increase of fuel, we're seeing it and having to just move money around just to cover.
Chris, and I did, just to reassure you and what Jim said, I did make sure that the trees that needed to come down, that John went out and checked it, I made sure those were done before suggesting to move that money into the gasoline and diesel fuel account.
Didn't want anybody to have the impression that, we skimped on tree.
Right,
products.
right, no,
Not at all.
fair enough.
No.
So do we think the 15,000 is going to be enough to cover the rest of the fiscal year?
Well, the good news was from April to May, then, what we got in March and we paid for in April was higher than what we got in April and paid in May. There actually was a little bit of a decrease, so that was very encouraging, but I don't know for sure. I wish I could say, yes, it's gonna be enough, but time will tell.
We're not in a high. use.
We're not in a high demand period.
With the buses off the
Well,
road,
the
most
buses
of them,
Off the road and.
Right.
The highway projects aren't such that these trucks aren't constantly on the road all the time. So
Right.
it's a time where you can exhale a bit.
okay, good.
Yeah, the diesel is much higher than the gasoline. So that being said, yes, it will be better. Is it enough? I'm not sure yet, but we're in a better place right now.
Went down 76.
7 cents.
Our problems are over.
My car is on empty and I'm afraid to go to the pump tomorrow. Anyway. Okay, anything else on transfers? Okay, then I will move on to the Board of Education. I will enlarge that some. As I said, Superintendent Hecht apologizes for not being here. She had a prior commitment. We do have Rhea from the Board of Education here if there are any questions. I can listed their transfers. Any questions? And everybody has in their packet both the last fiscal year as well as this fiscal year. So if you want to do a year over year comparison, we have the data. Anything else? Otherwise,
Madam
Wait.
Chair, I would ask, I don't know, does anybody get this prior to the meeting?
yeah, it was
In
in
the
your
email?
email.
Okay.
Yeah, you're in your
No.
email.
Jill, you sent, you normally send it to my regular Gmail account, correct? Okay, I'll double check. I didn't see it, sorry. I was gonna say if you don't. then-
Yeah, I- what I did is I took everything that was in the email and downloaded it, and that's what I'm sharing. So I know it was attached.
You
'cause
get it, I don't know, unless it got caught somewhere.
there were 12 or 14 attachments, so
Huh.
it was a hefty email. Okay, yes.
Just one thing to point out, and you guys know, I really kind of watch, one particular area of the Board of Ed financial reports, the salaries and wages, which is by far and away the largest portion of, combined those two items, largest portion of their budget. And as we weigh in on possible reductions on budget requests, I think it's important for us to try to understand, where they are in particular, because it's such a large portion. So in year-to-date expended through May 31 of 2021. Is everybody on that page?
2021.
Yeah, page 6. Okay. And towards the top of that page, it says, salary and wages, employee benefits,
Mhm.
and then you have two line items. And if you look at, because Jill and Emily would kind of provide you month to month, which we get all the time anyhow. You look at the year-to-date expended for 5/31/2021. So with 1 month to go in the year, this is what was expended in last year. The total between those two items, salary and benefits, 9.984 million. If you look at the report for 2022 for May, you're going to see a year-to-date expended 9.856. Now, we know that we've had carried some vacancies that were obviously inappropriate. We didn't want them, but they're there. And that money is mounting up. So compared to last year, when this report was provided, there's expenditures of
30,000 difference.
138,000 less this year than last. So I suspect that that same type of under expense will occur in June. Commensurate with it, it being a month versus 11 months. And I do want to just everybody keep in mind, that last year's the Board of Ed contributed toward the budget $475,000, I believe the number was. This year, 200,000. But given the fact that their expenditures for salaries and benefits are running even lower now by about 130 so on thousand than last year, I need to look, at least in my mind, to try to make some projections as to what their final surplus cash will be. And that says to me, it's going to go up over last year's total, which means last year's total between the 475 that they contributed, we should make sure, double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's right. That and when you combine the amount of money that they supplied, the 475 toward the budget that we're presently in, and still had about $500,000 of unexpended and uncommitted cash, I have to believe that that number in this year is going to increase. So if, in my mind, it has to go over $1 million, and probably to $1.05 million. So I think that we just need to be cognizant of that. But firstly, before I even say the word, does anybody have any questions they follow what I'm saying here? Anybody who does not? Okay, so what you can expect at this point, based on these numbers, is that there is going to be given the lower level of commitment to the town budget process that we're presently involved in, and the lower level of expenditures, double whammy in the total amount of surplus cash, less whatever they contribute toward the budget. The number is going to be, I believe, about $800,000.
And I think it is to point out, as you had said, much of the both 2021 and also 2022 is we've had positions unfilled, different positions, some higher wage, some lower wage, but positions that are unfilled that are contributing to the fact that we're not spending all of that.
Mhm.
And therefore it will be surplus at the end of the year. Or we have filled it with a long-term sub, which doesn't hit salaries, or we've filled it with somebody who is less expensive. So that will also be the delta.
We do also know that there have been, I know at least two recently that left that were tenured, and their wages are more expensive given what they teach and their tenure to go to other school systems that were paying more. Which, the rest of that salary or those salaries are going to be left over because we're not paying it at that higher.
Chances are we're not going to hire a
Right.
top step tenured type person to fill it.
Right.
That's a good point, and buttresses what I'm saying as we look at this.
Yeah.
I think that there's.
But they may take
I'll
full
leave it at that.
benefits
I'll leave it at
that they
at this
didn't
point.
have. That those people, I mean, it's. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I will make this one other comment though. Vacancies, when you have over 100 positions, will always exist.
Mhm.
There's always a turnover number. That's my stuff.
But you generally want to keep that number low because it's expensive. Turnover is expensive. It's either, a loss in actual dollars due to production, or in this case, it's an actual loss in learning and the continuity.
But
And
it's
the
a
onboarding.
reality.
It is,
It's
yeah,
reality.
fair.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's what goes on. And
I think to that point, especially when it's going on year after year after year after year, right? So it's not just like it's a fluke. I think that's that goes to my other point of what is the current ratio? What is the classroom ratio in Bolton
depends on
on average?
well, it depends on the subject matter. As you
And the
get
grade level.
Right.
Right.
So, but we, small. We have
It's
small.
fairly
classes.
small, isn't it?
And yeah, that's why
So-
it's such a great school system.
I will say, to the turnover point, we have gotten hit particularly hard these past 2 years with COVID, teachers leaving because of it and not being able to fill those. And teachers have left because they've gotten higher salaries at other schools. So,
If I
Bobby.
may, I can share an article in the Wall Street Journal, which just came out on that very topic. It's a nationwide issue of them leaving the profession. And a lot of it being a former educator, a lot of it has to do with the opportunities that are now before a lot of people in the education field. That's a lot different than being an educator, which I don't care what system you are, it's gonna pay you more with less aggravation. I mean, that's just out there. And yes, particularly in a high, not that teachers aren't highly skilled, but the more highly science and technical side of it. The demand for that in the private sector has gone through the roof. And the education says you cannot keep up with it. And that's just it. So you're gonna be facing this right along. And And what you're gonna get are newer people coming into the system, which, financially is okay.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing to get new.
Well, you're right, because we tend to get stale after a while. You know, to have fresh ideas come in,
Mhm.
it really is, but that's. What I'm trying to get to, it's not unique to us. It's there, it's throughout the whole education system.
Well, for those teachers who are leaving to go to other districts, obviously those other districts have openings, so otherwise they wouldn't hire them. So
There you go.
there's a whole lot of shuffling.
It's forever thus.
Mhm.
And we've been called the training ground in the past because we don't pay top step, but we're considered one of the best school systems. And so some people are drawn to it for that. Other people will stay because of that, and other people will want to stretch their wings and do bigger things.
Any other questions or comments on education? Then, is there anything in our other category? Jill, am I missing anything that I need to put in the other category? Nope, good.
Nope.
Okay, then we are going to move on to ongoing business. Discussion of the budget. The meat of what we need to talk about tonight. To set expectations, we do have to come up with a number tonight. So that is our plan. Before we do that, can I ask a favor? Do these lights right above us? You want them? Yeah, I would love them.
Help us see it.
When it gets dim, I have a harder time. Ooh, oh, okay, wow, much better, much better. Now this should go so much smoother. There you go. Okay. What I would like to do is, if that is not what I would like to do, this is where I would like to do. So this is where we are as of today. Our third referendum was at a 4.17 mill rate, and that failed. If you, in terms of, no, I don't want to rename the sheet. Thank you. In terms of voting numbers, you can see that we had 359 yeses, 406 nos. The no's was up 8 from last time and up an additional 8 from the time before. So our no's have been fairly consistent. Our yeses have gone from 267 to 300. So that's 33, and then up 59 to 359. I'm realizing that is really small, and I apologize. I can see it perfectly on my screen here. Oh, okay. There we go. Okay. So that's sort of where our numbers are from there. So obviously we have to make additional reductions for the next referendum. We are at,
We have the sweet spot.
what do you mean, sweet spot?
What do you mean? There's a certain number that I think Bob talked about.
400.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what we've said is if we have 1,000 voters, is it 1,000 or 1,200 voters?
Over there.
Something like that.
Based on
I thought it was
where you
right.
are now, you need to get over 800 votes.
Over 800.
And that has been, and it's that you look back historically, that 400 no's it's constant.
Right.
And
Yeah,
Which is like a 25.
Yeah.
And that's-
Giving it 5.
so, yeah, no, it's, that is the conversation we've had every single time, is that a small percentage of the public is deciding the budget for the whole town.
Well,
Which is-
let's be fair. There was a time before we had referendum, and it was 12 or 15 people
Fair enough.
sitting right here that made the decision on millions of
And
dollars.
we ourselves did that during COVID.
That is very true. We did do that during COVID. So. But
I heard comments that we had quite a bit of people at the polls at certain times after 5 PM or so. I don't know if Ross, that's correct. And I,
Those signs.
and I saw
Yeah.
where parents were bringing in their children that were over 18 years old, and they're walking them inside. So I thought that was a positive sign.
Yeah,
Younger folks,
there's like a rush around lunchtime and there's a good size, rush after dinner time. A little bit before dinner time and then, after quite a few.
The differential had been 98 the last time,
and we are
at 47.
47.
47.
So
So
we're-
it's shrinking.
And the interesting thing was, I think last year, the total number voted in the fourth referendum was down a little bit too, if I recall correctly, from the fourth was down in total votes from the third, but the number of no's dropped off a bit. Because they either left town or got what they, wanted.
So,
do a vacation time. And may I?
yes,
The board of selectmen will be meeting Friday morning at 8 AM to set the next date. And we are recommending a date in about 3 weeks.
so when we get to the end of the agenda and we talk about additional dates, I'm going to throw a date out there in anticipation of what's going to get approved. And obviously we will revise it as needed, if that's okay. Okay. If we take a look at the reductions that we have made so far, take a look, let's make that a little bigger here. Oop, sorry. So far, after the first referendum, we've made a total of $100,000 reduction, split 40-60. For the second referendum, we made a $41,000 reduction that was only to the education. So to date, we have made $141,000 in reduction. You can see that the split between, or the proportion town to education, 28% overall to the town, 72% to education. I would like to just put out there, both of our budgets are, I'm just going to go back and not use my mouse. There we go. Okay. If you take a look at the health insurance as a component, since both the town and the education side in effect are under budgeted because of the 8 to 10.5% differential on the health insurance. If you incorporate that in, taking a look at the reductions, it's sort of a $42,000 reduction to the town and $158,000 reduction to the education, which is a 21.79% split. If you want to think about it with those health insurance underfunding incorporated. So our job tonight is to decide what our reductions are for the next referendum. And I think I would like to throw out there something that Ross had started with our last discussion. If I may put you on the
Depends
spot.
on which, what I said. I'll let you talk before I say it.
Okay.
We're gonna go into my speech about marriage. I don't know if people here want to hear.
That was a different conversation. It is, it is sort of how are we feeling as a board about this budget? I think our conversation last week, we all were fairly comfortable with what we had proposed at the beginning, but obviously we have to make reductions. So the magnitude of the reduction that we need to take, and I'm just going to throw out, and this is where I'm quoting you, is it a $1 reduction, Alex? I'm meaning that metaphorically.
my head's going like this, so I'm gonna.
Is,
And I mentioned that to some people and they felt it would be like a slap in their face because they felt that what we had done so far was really piddling compared to the size of the budget. So I don't think we want to go in a dollar.
and I know you never intended it for it
No.
to be a dollar, but it is the relative
Conversation
magnitude.
Started, yeah.
Exactly. How do we feel in terms of what our next reduction is? Is it, we know that this budget is tight in a variety of different ways. Take a look at the fuel and diesel numbers that we were talking about earlier. What do we want to do?
Madam Chair, can we look at, so we start looking at those, the current mill rate, look at the numbers that way.
This?
When you say current mill rate, you mean what we're paying
Yes,
now,
that's right.
as opposed to the proposed.
Right, so we can at least understand.
So if you, but this is what you're referring to?
Right, right,
Okay.
that spreadsheet.
So the referendum that failed was at a 40.17 mill rate. So if we want to take a look at it from the pure mill rate perspective, if we want to bring it down to below 40, that's a $74,000 reduction. If we want to bring it to the current mill rate, that's a $296,000 reduction
Additional or
from today, from this point. Just to give you sort of order of magnitudes.
Can I ask everyone a question on this one? Because in the past, we've talked about mill rate because that is one thing that has been brought up. This last season, so far, I haven't heard anybody bringing up mill rate, which I think is unusual, given, the past. Has that been brought up at all, Ross, or anybody, the mill rate, or are they specifically talking about the?
Yeah.
They are talking.
they focus on the mill rate coming out of their pocket, which is reflected in the mill rate.
Because I just
on
haven't
their
heard
property.
specifically the mill rate, specifically 40. Unlike last year. Last year, we heard quite a bit
People
about the mill rate.
focus on the mill rate. Sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's not, because you can have circumstances. We do a reassessment and the property values go up, the mill rate can go down and you still pay more out of your pocket.
Potentially, if you're, because you're assessment
Potentially.
limit, yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, so they focus on, it's on the mill rate, just what they're currently spending and they don't want to spend more. They can't in many cases.
Pam, you had a comment.
I was approached and someone said that there's a group that had gathered at a local watering hole. And the discussion was, I'm not voting for this unless it comes down to a 40. Some people understand what that means and other people don't understand.
And that's,
Thank you.
to your point, that's the challenge, because it's I understand where they're coming from, but it's very easy to say, that I heard, and I mean, I've said it to this group too, that I'm on a much reduced income being retired. And I can say that it's very hard to, pay the bills and such, but then when you try to explain the other side of it, what the town's needs are, what the Board of Education, it's not as simple a soundbite as that. Because then you get into what are you willing to give up in return for us, dropping this, and then it's like, I don't want to give up anything. You guys just need to stop spending so much. So, it's that kind of conversation you wind up getting into, which is a challenge, because no, you really have to have that dialogue of like, okay, I hear what you're saying. What are we collectively willing to give up and still maintain us as a functioning community that, is not going backwards, but going forwards. So it's a difficult conversation to have because most people aren't willing to have it.
Yeah, I just didn't know if it was, has come into play about, people thinking that home values are going up and making that relationship to the mill
No.
rate possible, but it hasn't.
Not
Okay.
It's not that,
Fair enough.
in-depth. It's just like what Pam said. It's like they focus on the mill rate. They don't want to spend more than they're currently spending. They can't afford it.
Okay.
And, again, that's from the folks that I get a small sampling of
Sure.
when they come in there and talk. So I think you could probably say it's representative of that 400 or 500 that both know.
Mhm.
I think it would be a fair statement to make. As far as the other people, I really don't know.
You're not a mind reader?
No,
Oh.
I told them that, but they didn't believe me. No, so I think this is just where we are,
Yeah.
and we're just stuck with making, we're stuck with making decisions, aside from the fact that this is what we were elected to do, but.
Yeah. No, I just want to make sure we're looking at the right ball and it's still in play. All right.
Yeah, the JI tonight said, one of the comments was that they didn't want to see an increase in the mill rate. And I look at that and I just say, then you don't want to see an increase in quality of the community either.
Mhm.
And truly, inflation is hitting the town, inflation is hitting the school department. You can't back away from that.
Hits all of us. Yeah.
We would love to come in with 0%.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But that's, I mean, in my mind, that's not fiscally responsible.
No.
And it does not take our town forward. It does not support our education. It does not
Right.
get our trees trimmed.
And let's also just take that a little step further, which is we still have to have a discussion about, the impact of our decisions on our bond rating, because that's also in the future. And if you go and lower the budget too much, that doesn't leave you room to increase like the contingency fund, which lowers the bond rating, and it doesn't leave you as much room to go put more money, not raises the bond rating rather, and lowers the percentage that we have to pay. And the same thing with our, rainy day fund. If we maybe we need to increase the size of that and determine, do we need to put more in than we currently have in order to improve our bond rating, which is needed to do future work for, schools as well as the Board of Selectmen. So if you wind up, this is one of those other trade-offs that we really haven't talked about. If you drop this too much, next year you want to go and talk about making the contingency fund bigger, putting a little bit more into, rainy day fund, then you have less to play with, because you've already lowered this. So I'm just bringing this up as like, I want us to make sure that we're looking ahead too, because that's a little further out than we're kind of been focused on what's the immediate impact and making some people happy today so they won't keep voting no. But is that the right thing when you're trying to look ahead where, we have some things to do with the bond rating, to help with our bond rating to lower future, expenses.
Yes, Charlie.
As part of that, I keep hearing, or you're right, I'm hearing more now, we're in a recession. It's an undeclared recession yet, but we're going to be in a recession. So next year and the year after that, what are we going to do with our budgets for those years? Are we going to be required to reduce our budgets even more because of the fact that we're in a recession? Or do we act responsible in the town's best interest and try to give them a responsible budget with a responsible change, whatever it has to be? So it's a tough position, but we need to look down the road for all of those reasons. So if we reduce it too much this year, what do we do next year when they want to see a bigger reduction because they're in a full flying recession?
And then we're also
Maybe not.
trying to look at improving the bond rating, and that's would effectively mean reductions in some budgets for town and for Board of Selectmen in order to better service a future need. So it's a narrow path we have to walk on.
Tightrope, yeah.
Bob.
In response to what Ross just said, and you're right, but we do have a relatively high bond rate, especially given the economic makeup of this town, which is it's mainly the taxes mainly fall to the residents because we have so little business. That's not going to change. So it's been that way for a long time. But the last time we did go out for borrowing, our rating was increased by like 2 slots. I think we're at like, like I said, I think AA2 or something like that. But we have a relatively high bond rating given the resources of the town and then very small business community. So I think that I hear what you're saying, but the bond rating probably shouldn't be changing. It'd be nice if we could improve it, but as you did mention earlier in some of your comments, in order to do that, you'd have to have a much higher contingency fund, and you'd have to have a much higher rainy day fund, which neither of which is going to happen.
Well, you see, again, part of why I brought this up is I want us to make sure we have this conversation and we're on record for having the conversation, and whatever we decide takes that into account. Because we have not been having this as part, this
fair
as
enough.
part of our conversation. So it's it's my comment, like just like with the dollar, bringing this up is more to poke at us and just make us all think about it and have that conversation, and then make sure we agree on what we're doing, because I'd rather have us say, okay, like what Bob said, maybe we don't need to do anything, but we all had this discussion, we talked about it, and then we're saying, yeah, let's, we're willing to go down that path. I don't want to go down that path without having that, discussion, because that it usually winds up messy. Because someone will, the finger pointing can start, and it can get political when it really isn't. It really just needs to be a matter of what is, the best for the town, and do we consider it all. So, again, that's more, the spirit of why I'm bringing it up too.
I think to piggyback on that, the idea that that we could get a potential revenue increase in the future long term because of the values of the homes. And I think that comes up soon. I don't know when next year. So
But that wouldn't go into effect for 2 years.
that would, okay.
Yeah.
So it's a long-term play. Since we're talking long-term, we do understand that potentially there could be a situation where we would get increase in revenues in the future. Not today, but potentially we could get an increase in revenue based on housing prices or housing values.
But the housing values don't directly affect the budget
Or the taxes.
or the taxes.
And they have nothing.
Normally what happens with the revaluation, it's just a shuffling of the deck, saying that this guy pays more in taxes, this guy pays less, and this guy pays about the same. And it actually works out to about 30% separations in those three different divisions. So it's just a shuffling as to who's paying what. The budget stays the same. The mill rate changes because you do have higher values, but the mill rate goes down so that a third pay more, a third pay less, and about a third stay around the same. So
I guess if all things remain equal, if the mill rate would not change, then it would be an increase in revenues.
it would be a substantial.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Without-
possible.
Oh, without that.
But it's not gonna happen that way.
But
Oh, it is-
another point I would bring out too is that the value of the home does not necessarily have anything to do with the income that that person has, unless they do a reverse mortgage or unless they sell their house. It's really money that's getting taken out of their current pocket. It's not coming out of their house magically. So that's the, the other thing to remember. So.
Other comments, questions, feelings, pokings?
I'll make one other little observation just to throw it out there, is that when we do look at the school and the Board of Selectmen, when we look at their budgets, they're really playing in two different ball games. Because the Board of Selectmen, we could sit here tonight and say, we're cutting your budget in half and do that. But we can't do that with the Board of Education because of state statutes that limit any cuts unless there's a substantial change in enrollment to what their budget, we can't go below their budget last year. And so that also comes into when you're doing your planning for the budget, they have to plan to spend what they spent last year, whereas the town doesn't have to do that. So there's a little bit of a difference, too, just in, the playing fields here. They're not quite, they're not quite level, and there's nothing we can do about that fields being different, but we just need to be aware of that, too, as part of this discussion. And it's something we don't talk about because every time the school goes and turns in like, $1 million, $500,000, that was a floor that got raised by that much on their budget. Whereas we don't have that with the town. They can't hold us to last year's budget like the schools do. So that's also something to think of too, as we move forward as part of fiscal responsibility, is the fact that they're two different playing fields, here through the grace of our state legislature, whether it's good or bad and different, it's just the way
It is what it is.
Like the contract.
Just like the contracts, I mean, they are what they are. We still have to pay them and
Yeah.
honor those contracts. So,
I'll make a motion.
okay,
I think I'm gonna make a motion that we, I really don't think it appropriate for us to actually try to get under 40 at this time. Given the situation that, overall economic situation that we're all talking about. But we have to come up with a reduction that makes sense. So I'm looking at, we're at 40.17. I think we should aim for like, 40, another $40,000 reduction. And let's see.
$40,000 reduction would take us to 40.07.
Right. And I would suggest that we allocated $30,000 reduction in the Board of Ed request. Excuse me. In the remaining 10 to the Board of Selectmen. I gotta get excuse me.
Okay, I will reiterate what Bob's motion is: a $40,000 reduction total, $10,000 to the Board of Selectmen, $30,000 to the Board of Education. Do I have a second on that motion? Okay, I heard Alex first, so Alex. So open for discussion.
I think so again, it goes back to that discussion I had, the town person. We talked about, our classroom sizes. I really do think we need to look at that. It's great that we have a smaller average than our surrounding towns, but, that is, there's a direct correlation between that and the fact that we need a certain amount of teachers. And so, I do think that there's opportunity there, put it that way. Based on those things. And so that would definitely, it would shrink the workforce. And we talked about this before, something we don't want. We do want great, we want the best schools. We want individuals that work at NASA, which is great. But we have to make a tough decision. And I think those two are correlated. And so that gives us an opportunity with regards to the amount of teachers we currently employ. And so that's part of the reasoning that I think that we do have a huge opportunity. This is a good amount that.
So are you supporting the motion, or are you suggesting that the ratio be changed or more, or all come
I
from
support.
the Board of Education?
You support.
I
Okay.
support.
I'm going to ask a question because we have a lot of experience in the room with the budgets. Bob, extensive. We have Adam and we have Pam. Going back on historical data, you've seen a lot. Do you think that do you think we could get the job done with that cut? I can't believe I'm about to say this, but is that a large enough cut? I know. But well, here's the thing. We keep going back. We're spending,
$4,000 a referendum.
$4,200, right?
It's not a very efficient ratio.
Right.
some of this also, the July one will go into next year as opposed to this year.
Yeah.
Request for referendum.
Do we feel like we can get those 50 voters, those 50 additional voters with this? Or just with the process? I just want to get a historical sense.
If you're asking an opinion,
Yeah,
I'll be a bad guy on this one. No, I honestly believe that and you hit the nail on the head. People look at the mill rate.
Yeah.
And if you bring that number down to, I don't care, 3.9999, whatever that is, to me, that's gonna be your magic number. Yeah, you just gotta get just below 40. To me, that's $70,100 or whatever.
$74,000.
$74,000.
$74,000.
And yeah, we're all gonna take a hit on it. And yeah, but it sure beats coming back again. And then having expended more and having to do this again, and I think the reductions will be even worse.
And we will have, Mayor,
Yes.
by the end of the year, we'll have money turned back in from the Board of Education. We will have money that will help us take a little bit of a deep breath. We still have to wait a year, unfortunately, for the money to come in from the state for the car tax.
The delta
it's
between.
a bad position. It's a steep number. That is a steep number. Yeah, we gotta be real. Yeah.
Yeah,
However,
it's gotta be practical. And I know everybody, we're all gonna take a hit. That's
Mhm.
been there, done it too often, but it's better to do that now with an amount that you can, I think, deal with, than have to go forward again. And have to deal with another.
you divided 66 to 34%. 74 for the balance of between the two cuts, and we'll make it work. I hate it, but I want to get it done. I need to listen to the townspeople at this point. 3 times we've worked this really hard, we've stretched this, and this is coming from someone who had a great budget.
Yeah. So I guess at this point then, let's say that they do reject it, then we have to put our foot down and it's the dollar.
That's what I'm thinking.
That's why I just want to make it, make it clear where we're
I
going. Because I don't
agree
think we
with
can
you
go
100%.
lower anymore.
Right. Yeah,
Are we going to even go to the route with the odd number again?
I think.
And
I
we
would.
need to.
I would.
And use it and take it, save the
That's why this, well, that's 74,000 is 39,900.
71 is somewhere between 40 and
I think we need
39.99.
to-
So Jill, a $71,000 reduction, what kind of mill rate does that get? See, the problem is
I know, it's
there are
not
lots of
just-
digits out there. So,
I
I
know.
mean,
Give me a second and I'll let you know.
okay.
While she's doing that, I'll just say, my heart tells me that you're exactly what you said, and I was ready to propose it.
I don't disagree with you.
I was ready to
You
propose
disagree?
it, but I'm thinking, I know that the town side, especially, is close. There's there's a lot more, and there's a lot of variables at play here, given the economic situation and everything else with cost of things. But anyway, yeah, I think that ideally and that comment that you heard, somebody related to what they had heard, that you got to get that moment on our foot. It was a bad day when we had that last reval and we didn't get enough out of it. The one before that is when it hammered us and got us from like 31 mil to 40 some odd. So people like to return to those happy days of yesteryear. Of course, it's
Now, next year, we'll be getting more revenue coming in because we'll have a couple more of those businesses that'll be up online.
Potentially.
Money
Are we
from the
taking-
state.
Are we taking a risk here? Yeah.
Yes.
Are we looking at those actually coming up to play? We know that we've got a restaurant that's closing, a small one. And our fingers are crossed that these 2 gas stations are going to be popping.
2 gas stations.
Yeah, where the old M&M is and where the Mopes.
Well, it'll be assessed what they think
Whether they make
Well,
money.
there'll be significant difference in that, plus there's some other
There's some other
commercial
things in the
properties
works.
in the works.
Mhm.
So we probably will, yeah,
Well, that would,
yeah, we're probably gonna be
That'll be a year.
in a good, even still, next year and the year after. I mean, looking beyond, as you said, looking beyond this 1 year, we actually have some good news as far as our growth, non-residential growth.
You know, the other thing.
It's
too-
minor, don't.
yeah,
But still.
I think it can cover 74,000.
Yeah, the other thing too is, like I said, I do know that the town is also kind of stretched thin because you got a lot of guys you have some folks who quit, I know, I believe. And there's other people that are out on leave. When I had to go set up the voting machines, there was only Mark there. They usually have 2 guys and
We
I.
have very short staff right now.
Yeah, I know. So I did, I wound up helping him set the stuff up and when
Thank
we
you.
get done with this, we're gonna
I'm
help
sure he appreciates it.
help him take it back to, wherever it's supposed to go.
Part-time job? Oh.
No, I'm just seriously, too. And then you stop to think about it, where the town, we need facilities for the town hall, our staff is right up, they're gonna be in a trailer. And then we've got this dump of the building on Notch Road that needs to be torn down. You can't leave it there till it just falls down, because having eyesores like that also says something about the town.
mhm.
We got beautiful schools. You can't have like ugly other buildings there. They're not hidden by the fact that we have a beautiful fire station and beautiful schools. So we do have to keep that in mind and make sure we're not, it's like shooting one part of the town, in the foot. In town, I mean collectively,
Mhm.
I don't mean like Board of Selectmen and Board of Education, I mean the town, because we're a dinky little town, there's 5,000 of us. And it can't be in separate camps, they've all got to balance out at the end of the day.
Looks like Jill might be ready.
Jill, yes,
That'll be at $39.99.
71,000?
Yeah.
Okay,
And
Can
that
you-
takes 40 out of play.
and that takes 40 out of play. Do you have access to the spreadsheet, and can you figure out, change this row and change that number for me?
So you want me to just add 71?
Yeah, add a row.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, we have a motion on the floor for a $40,000 reduction, $30,000 from the Board of Education, $10,000 from the Board of Selectmen. We've had a lot of conversation. I have to admit that, again, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm not sure it's enough. I'm not sure it's gonna pass. And as much as I'm enjoying sitting here with you guys, I really don't want to go through this
And
conversation
as
again.
much as I like my fellow poll workers, we're not, they don't want to do this again, and we're not doing the town a service by plopping down money every time we do this, because it's not a very efficient ratio that we're getting, saving when you add in the cost of the referendum.
I'd like to amend my motion,
Okay,
given our discussion. Let's go with 71. That gets us under 40. That's gonna be a magic position for many voters. I think that's enough to get enough of the swing voters, even though I think that none of us really believe that we should make this reduction that big, but or one at all, maybe. But anyway, that's where we're at. We need to get a budget, and obviously this is inefficient. So what is, I would like to really Charles idea on this, but I would like to amend my motion to say, let's go with the $71,000 reduction. And I certainly would be open as to how we would allocate it. But I think it would be,
I mean, if just going back to this spreadsheet, just in terms of what our reductions have been so far in terms of the split, it's a 28%, 72% split. And I thought we could,
Balance that out a little.
yeah, so you've amended your motion to be a $71,000 reduction.
yeah, but I think here's the discussion, especially.
Okay, can I have a second on that?
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion on a $71,000 reduction. And I'm hoping that part of that discussion is how should we allocate that?
Well, my position for the 71 is, my big concern is that I don't want to do a $40,000 cut now and then have to come back, make another $40,000 cut, which isn't just another $40,000 cut, it'd be a $44 And
Change,
change cut because of the, and then, you know, we're over the 71 anyways. So that number, I don't like it, but it's not about what you like. I think it's, I think we have to go with that.
I think we have to go with it. I agree with you to get the, to just end this, to get the mill rate down to below 40, to put an end to this cycle of this, and that we really cannot go lower because I think it's irresponsible when you look ahead of, you look beyond this year and you look at just trying to put an end to this budget cycle. It's not responsible to go lower. So I just think we need to keep that in mind. So whatever happens after this vote.
The only other thing I will say is that I do hope we can communicate out there about the relevance of, this is, talk about being far below inflation, significantly below inflation for what this, for what we're asking for budget this year. And the relationship of, we are moving funds around to cover costs like the increase in fuel and diesel.
If we could get the JI to lead their discussion of the budget away from that 3% increase, which they put in the top paragraph of their opening statement every time. The 3.6% is now down to 3% increase over last year's spending, regardless of the fact that we've got all these increases that are mandatory. They don't even go into that.
Yeah.
But if we can get them to start the conversation by saying that we're looking at less than a 2% or whatever it works out to be increase, actual increase in the overall budget. That might be a step forward in order to be able to hopefully, between that and the looking at below 40 mils, hopefully that will give it enough incentive for the public to go with it. And as far as the ratio goes, I have no problem with the 268. whatever.
So what I'm just throwing, I did the 40-60 split of the 71,000. So it's 20, if I did my math right, so 71 times
40% being,
to the town and 60% to education, 40, 60, 2/3, 2/3, 1/3. Isn't that approximately what our budget is?
Yeah.
Town is 1/3, education is 2/3 ish,
I think it's closer to
3466.
3466.
No,
So 71 times 0.34 gives me
51,000 and then 20, that makes it nice and even out there with another percentage.
well, it's 2,400 and 47.
Directionally like the idea of where we're going, but based on what I said earlier, the two different playing fields that we're in, I would like to see more coming out of the school than out of Board of Education. So we're being responsible with what floor we're setting for Board of Education's budget going forward. Because again, they can certainly propose more, the year after than the floor that they are set at. But I don't want to just keep saying that it's okay that they gave us back $500,000, because that's $500,000 that we can't cut their budget by the next year. They have to spend that money the next year. So they're really not starting zero base. The town starts zero base. The school Board of Education has to come up with a budget that spends at least what they spent last year. So I really would like to see this, I would like to see going more like 1090, something in that direction from a percentage, basis, just to be responsible about, controlling expenses and, like I said, in that other playing field, which is under different rules.
I guess I have a bit of an issue, and I understand the fact that, we can't cut the education below what it was last year.
Correct.
But I look at what is being returned as two things. One is unfilled positions. I know last year also we had COVID money that came in. So they spent money on things using the COVID money. So that did give us some additional funds to be returned. I guess I am hesitant to go with like a 10%, 90% split. I just think that's a little, especially since the last reduction that we made was solely to the Board of Education.
Yeah, I would also state that I've done process improvement in just about any organization can give up 1% without working. It's a really small amount, and I've done this for years, working with people to reduce their expenses. 1%, nobody misses. You get down to 5%, they have to start thinking about it. You get below 10%, they have to start thinking about changing how they do things. But like I said, 1 to 3% is just shuffling some things around. You don't fill a position and whatever, and life goes on. And, with all the money that the school is giving back because of, not filling positions, I have not heard that the world has ended. So, that's another thing that feeds into, my thoughts on that.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I think that it was reported today that the CEOs of private companies are quietly not filling positions. So what I would ask is that perhaps that's a suggestion that we quietly not fill certain positions. And that would be more on the Board of Education side. So I'm with the 90-10 split.
I will say that I have heard quite a bit of burnout complaints about the education and our educators and our staff being stretched. We've had subs, they have been working a considerable amount under very difficult circumstances over these last 2 years. So I don't think quietly not filling positions is the answer on this one. I really don't. When we're talking about having long-term subs, I think I don't think that should be a standard. No,
I don't think that does our children any service.
no, you lose continuity and learning. So
And
think-
I do,
But my question to the school system, and I think Superintendent Heck is here today. My question, which was brought up to me, was what is the current ratio of teacher, student to teacher ratio in the school system, and how do we compare it against other school systems?
Very positive. Yeah, it's very, very positive.
I would,
Small classes.
I just
But that doesn't mean you can eliminate the class.
I respectfully, I understand. I just asked the question.
No, I agree.
That's all I'm asking. The private sector is moving to not fill certain positions. The public sector generally does follow suit. So this is just the reality. We went through the 2008 crisis. We're probably looking at that again. I'm just saying that these are tough decisions. Nobody wants to do this, but I really do think that the burden does not need to fall on the town. Sorry, that's just my thank you.
So,
if it's okay, Superintendent Heck, thank you for joining us. I know that you had a previous commitment, so welcome. And you had your
Thank
hand
you.
up.
Yeah, sorry I'm late, everybody. So a couple things. One, to Alex's question and Bob Monroe's point, we have smaller class sizes. That's part of why people move to Bolton and send their children to the Bolton Public Schools, because they want a small learning environment for their children. So that's number one. Number two is there are certain positions that we simply cannot just not fill. We have required by law things that we have to meet per a student's IEP. And so there are a number of positions that we are not in a place to even be able to do that. Now, there may be others, and quite frankly, there may be programs at this point, based upon what you're discussing this evening, that I'm going to be potentially recommending to the board if this passes. So to Alex's point, some things are going to go 100%. Likely, that's probably very true. To the point that Kristen Gorley raised, our staff has done an amazing job in the face of tremendous adversity with very few resources at their fingertips. And we've been down staff members. So people are doing extra duties all the time. And quite frankly, we're losing staff. We're losing staff to other districts that pay, and long-standing staff to other districts that pay a lot more money and require them to do less. So that's something else that I just want to call to everyone's attention, that will be a reality here, and not something that I think we necessarily want to continue to have to face if we can avoid it. There are positions right now that we cannot fill because we do not have bodies to actually fill the position. Now, that doesn't mean somebody isn't going to materialize between now and the start of school, but we've posted certain positions like 3 different times. We're not the only district experiencing that. Districts across the state of Connecticut, across the country, are experiencing it for just the reason that Kristen described, because of burnout. Because right now, being an educator, sort of like being in the sector of medicine, is probably the hardest place to be.
Thank you. Okay, so our conversation was around,
Sorry, what was the class size ratio again?
I don't have that ratio, Alex, off the top of my head. I can pull up a board packet for you and I could read it off by grade level if you want.
No, that's okay. I just on average, I was just curious. Somebody asked me, I just wanted to provide it.
17, 18 average at center school. It varies at the high school because you have some classes that have 27 students in it and you have some classes that have 13. So I would say on average, we're looking at 17, roughly. It's a best guess.
Appreciate it.
So when I used to do budgets at work, I'd allocate about 100,000 per person for, salary plus benefits. So if you look at this, we're talking $200,000 basically. We're talking maybe 2 people. It's not the end of the world. If you have a staff of 100, you'd get, that's 2%. And, we're also talking about splitting some of this goes against the town. So this is where I like to just make these conversations a little bit more real. And I hear we're talking about people. And I would always have somebody tell me, like, this is going to cost so much money. And I look at it and I say, well, let's sit down and look at this. How many people, is this going to be if we're averaging about 100,000 burden rate? And then it comes out to like 50 people working on this for 4 weeks worth of, work for not, it doesn't require that much. And so I also want to just make sure that we also make this a little bit more concrete, and they're not just talking about pie in the sky, that things are going to suffer. Let's look at the actual amounts of this. We're not talking about a lot of people, and I don't really want to be cold about this because I know all these people. I know the people in town. I know the people, some of the teachers in the school system. This is a hard decision to make. It's not easy. And it doesn't mean that it's going to get easier for the town staff, and it's not going to get easier for the school people. But I think that, like I said, take a look at that. You're really not talking about massive layoffs or anything. So I just want to, put a little bit of like math on this, even though it is people. And if I'm wrong about this, somebody tell me, but I can't imagine this is like 30 or 40 people that are going to get laid off, anywhere.
I have one thing to add. If we take into consideration that the last time around, the cut was 100% to the Board of Education, we roll that into the 41,000 that we cut last time with the 71 that we're talking about now, that totals 112. And if we use the ratio of 34-66 between those, that would mean 38,000 from the Board of Selectmen and 33 from the Board of Education, which totals 71, which would get us below 40, but would maybe equal out, taking into consideration the cut that we took last time, which was 100% from the Board of Education.
so
Does
what,
that make sense?
so what I think I'm hearing you say is 38,000 and 33,000, which gets us to the,
71.
still
But
gets
the
us to
ratio-
71. The ratio is,
Incorporates the 41. The 41 plus the 71 is 112. If you divide if you multiply the 112 between the 34 and the 66, you get 38 and 33.
So what are you proposing for a total amount, so we can just keep it simple?
We're talking about 71.
71,000
No,
still,
no, we're talking about a total reduction of how much?
71,000.
71,000.
71,000. That's the motion on the floor is the
And then we were
71,000.
discussing the ratios.
That's in addition to what we've already got.
Yes. That we have already done in
to get us
previous.
to Under 40.
Yeah. So this is the line that we are looking at right now, is just for reductions here. I have these for, just for information purposes.
And so those ratios that you have with, was it, I can't read it, 37
37.
to,
63.
those are accurate, those reflect what?
The totals.
The total amount.
It's
Of
a-
the three.
Yeah, so it includes the three
Referendum,
referendums. So it is a 37-63 split on
It
that.
just evens it out more towards what the actual budgets are.
If
which I
you,
don't think it's necessarily appropriate.
if you take a look at the health insurance, if you want to include that component too, it actually is a 30-70 split with the, what Mather had suggested, 38,000 to the town, 33,000 to the education.
So the way you're doing it now, it's basically one person comes out of the town and one person comes out of the school. Is what those numbers reflect. Is that an equitable split? Does it make sense? Again, I want to just keep this real and I want to keep talking about people, because that's what this really is. This is people do the work, and when you cut the money, people get cut. And so I just want to be, again, get into this. Does it make sense to take one out of a smaller pool and one out of a bigger pool, when the bigger pool can absorb more than the smaller one? You know, I don't want to keep talking about all this other stuff that doesn't really matter at this point.
It might be able to absorb more from an aggregate number point of view, but from the importance of the people in those.
I would disagree with that comment. strongly.
I don't think you want to keep going with that one.
Yeah.
They're all important on both sides of the fence.
I would
I
agree.
think it also has to be noted, a couple things that have to be noted. Number one, this isn't a business. It's a town operation. We're dealing with town services and we're dealing with Board of Education, our children and our townspeople. And quite frankly, Bolton's town side doesn't have a full-time staff, so to speak. So you say one person, but in actuality, it might be two part-time people. So that you could have one department suddenly devastated. The people are gone because we only have two people in the department. And maybe that's the only way to make up that difference. In the school system, you don't think that it's going to be just a program that's going to change. It could be a special needs person, special person that comes in to take care of the special needs person. That could be the 100,000 right there. So we're looking at things that are really complex. And I'm thinking that 38, 33 is not realistic at all. And I like the way that we had it before better, because it better represented the overall budget, and with cuts that we don't want to have to do in the first place, but it kind of balances it out to their overall budgets without getting into the issue that one guy is going to be gone in Bolton, the town, and one person's going to be gone at the school. That's because that's not necessarily going to happen. Not at all. It's just not going to be that way.
I will say that, Ross, I've built budgets as well in healthcare, so I listen, I feel you, right?
Yeah.
This is people, people will be affected, but I've also done what you did, and I built a healthcare center. We based it off certain ratios, right? I like the ratio. I know it's people. I do think this is a good way to look at it. I will say that if you're a visual learner, just take a look at the town. Somebody said this. We got a beautiful fire department. We have beautiful schools. We have fantastic teachers that are from the private sector, from NASA or wherever. We have wonderful resources. But I do think that our town is lacking. And like I said, I went over to Massachusetts, went to a bunch of different towns. They're gorgeous. They're pretty. They're New England towns. They're making movies in these towns. We really need to start thinking about investing in our town. So taking a little bit more money, I respect what you said. I get what you're saying because I thought about that before. I do think that we cannot do that because the future of this town, I do believe, needs to be an investment in the actual town proper versus the other side. Everybody has had a little piece of the action. I do believe that now is the time that we need to start investing in the town, and taking a big hit like $38,000 from the town at this time is inappropriate. I think it's a safety issue in my opinion as well. So that's just my 2 cents.
I would kind of support what Charlie and Alex are saying. I wouldn't, let's see us go back to 51, 20 or whatever.
It was 24 and 47. But
I'm
yeah,
sorry, my phone told me it's time to go to sleep. So I'm sure.
Not quite.
Yeah.
you start snoring, we'll
Yeah,
throw
and
things at you.
thank you for staying. We appreciate it.
So we've had the conversation of 38, 33, 24, 47. The overall, our motion right now is a $71,000 cut, reduction. So we still need to we need to land on what is the split for it. I know Bob had made the motion. So either we can, well, one thing we could do is we can vote, do we think that that's the right total amount, and then create a second motion about how the split is, or we can revise your motion to include the split. General feelings?
You want to do a consent, vote to, I think we're all in agreement on the 71, and that we're not going to go lower. So I think that's something if you want to do a vote on, fine, we get that out of the way and then continue with
The split. Okay, so the motion on the floor is a $71,000 reduction in total. And all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so we have a $71,000 reduction. Now we have to come up with agreement on what the split is. We've had conversation 38 to the town, 33 to Board of Ed, 24 town, 47 Board of Ed.
And then 1090.
We've had 1090 true, well, that's percentages. Let me get numbers there. So 71 times, so that would be 7,000 and 64,000.
I think this, what we have, the 2447 falls in the middle. And like I said, I don't like the steep cut, but I think it's necessary. I think that is probably, given, the problem with the cap and the problem with the insurance increase, we're already behind the 8 ball. This is probably the most fair that I can see. My 2 cents.
Is that going to turn into a motion?
I will think, yes, a motion. The 30-70 split, which would be,
Well,
making
if
the
you could,
motion.
if you could say, because this is,
Okay. I'll make a motion for a $24,000 reduction to the town and a $47,000 reduction to the Board of Education. Totaling 71,000.
Second.
okay. Thank you. Bob Monroe seconded, so Ashley has that. Discussion. More discussion. Any more discussion? Okay, then I will take it to a vote. The motion on the floor is a $24,000 reduction to the town and $47,000 reduction to education for the total of the $71,000. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
Ross, no. Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Was it Ross or Natalie?
It was Ross. Okay. Let me just, I need to. So then what I need is,
Emily, if you go to the tonight sheet, it'll give you the number. They already calculated it up, put it in there. So go to the
Yeah.
meeting. for the
Let me,
22nd.
do.
No, to the 22nd tab for June 22nd meeting budget.
You too. So that
New
is
number.
23,446,598, correct?
Correct.
Okay, let me come over here to be 23,446,598.
Correct.
Okay. Then I would appreciate it if somebody could make a motion reading that, and I can make it bigger if anybody needs me to. Bigger. Oh, come on.
I've got it right here. I'll go ahead and make the motion. I make a motion that the annual budget for the town of Bolton, Connecticut for the fiscal year 2023, as recommended by the Board of Finance, in the amount of $23,446,598 be adopted.
Thank you, Kristen. Do I have a second? Bob and Rose seconded it. Any discussion, or can I just call for a vote? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes. We have a budget number. Thank you, everybody. We are not done yet. We added to, actually, next on the agenda is additional meetings. As First Selectman Pam Sawyer said, that the town is meeting Friday morning to vote on the next referendum date. I think the date being proposed is July 12th, that Tuesday. And assuming that that is the date, we need to meet after that, as we have been doing. So the question is, do we want to keep with what we've been doing and meet the Wednesday night afters? So that would be July 13th. Thankfully, it's not a Friday. So July 13th at 7:15 p.m. If we can add that to our calendar as our next, and that will be a special meeting.
Emily, I was not able to secure that with Kathy.
Okay.
yet. But if we have more, I'll have to talk to her. I think that her phone was disconnected. They were trying to move the furniture in the office today, so I don't think she was with her at her phone. So, and I know that, I believe it's planning and zoning has a meeting that night, but if there's a different location, if we could do it at Herrick Park or senior center or in those classrooms, but I can talk to Jim about that too, and then.
Okay.
figure it
So
out.
location TBD.
Right.
But if everybody can please put July 13th on the calendar. I am going to be an optimist. If the referendum passes on the 12th and we set the mill rate on the 13th, traditionally what happens is after that, both the town and the education side go back and they say, okay, given the budget that has been passed, given the reductions that have been approved, what cuts does that mean to each of their budgets? So I want to ask Pam Sawyer and Superintendent Hecht and the Board of Education. I know Andrew is not able to be here tonight. How much time do you need? Because I know it's going to be July. How much time do you need before we reconvene to have that discussion? I think last year we did 2 weeks.
That's the reason. It's more reasonable.
2 weeks after the referendum, correct? I'm just trying to.
Yeah,
Right.
2 weeks
Yeah.
after the referendum. So if I'm looking at my calendar, that would be 26th, 27th, probably the 2 weeks after our meeting, because that's when we would. So Wednesday, the 27th. Can we shoot for that as having a meeting 7:15 TBD location? If the referendum fails, we will obviously cancel that meeting.
We will need that meeting anyway. Because the second date proposed for the next referendum would be the 26th.
Okay, perfect.
So I would pick that. That would be a good day.
Okay, so if we could have July 27th on calendars, so July 13th and July 27th as our next meetings.
Can I just ask, I'm sorry, I just want to be clear what, I'm trying to text board members and listen at the same time, and I'm not really good at that this time of night. Sorry, everybody. So in the hopes that this passes on July 13th, you guys are going to set the mill rate. If it
Correct.
passes, correct?
Yeah,
Then on July 27th,
we are, the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen would report back to the Board of Finance, given the reductions that were made, what is the change to your budget? What
I
is,
see. Got it. Thank you.
We don't need that information until, we don't have to need to have a meeting.
Correct.
That meeting could take place, that information can come forward in September for all that matters. It's not gonna.
I know traditionally we've done it sort of right after, because which, if it's a problem, we can obviously push this off until our September meeting.
I'm not, so I don't know. We had a plan to meet on July 7th if it didn't pass, because I think we thought the next referendum was going to be July 5th. So I have no idea if I even will have a quorum. I don't know.
Well, let's throw that date out there, and if Pam and Kristen, if you can let me know if that's not a date that works, then I can come back to the board and we can figure out something else.
But you're talking about 27th.
27th, July 27th. Okay. So tentative on July 27th, but put it on your calendar, because if it fails on the 12th, then we're going to need it anyway. Yikes. Okay. Clear as mud. Moving on. Last item on the agenda. Consider and possibly act, and most definitely act on setting a temporary mill rate. Because we do not have, July 1st is when our fiscal year starts. In order to get tax bills out and therefore revenues in, we need to send tax bills out. And so the question is, we need to set a temporary mill rate. And what is that temporary mill rate? It can be the current mill rate. It can be something else.
And that's what we did last year, right? We kept the same mill rate.
Yes.
Well, then I make a motion that we keep the same mill rate, just to keep it simpler.
You're not gonna, you can't get the tax bills
We can't get them out for July 1st.
for July 1st, whether you set this temporary mill rate or not. I mean, your due date will no longer be the 31st of July. It will be the 30th of August. Because you can't get it out before July 1st. So if you go beyond July 1st, you move the whole scenario of 30 days.
Just like we did last year.
Okay.
Which we did last year, but.
But if our referendum isn't until the 12th, we can't wait until then to set up a mill rate on
No,
the 13th.
that's
So I
right.
think we have to set it
Just to
tonight.
have
I'm just answering that part of it,
Yeah.
but
We have,
you're right. If if you don't set it now, then then we're behind 2 months.
Yeah.
So you're better off doing it now.
We
So-
have mailing issues, we have printing issues,
Yeah.
mailing
Yeah,
issues
it's
with our vendor,
Mhm.
because we're so late now. And we're in the queue. So, as last year, we'll post it on the town green that it'll be a month behind, and then we'll send out the supplemental.
And that is costly.
It is.
We don't like it, I know.
So here's a thought. Would it make sense if we have truly meant what we said tonight, we're not going to go any lower, would it make sense to set the mill rate at what we just proposed tonight? Because then you don't have to do a supplemental fill later.
If we do it for one.
Ross, can you repeat that?
No, my proposal was to set the mill rate for what we just, effectively what we agreed to tonight, like.
39.9.
99.
You cannot. Per the charter, you can't go higher.
Okay.
Oh, we
can't
cannot
do-
go higher
we
than,
cannot go
No,
higher
can't go
than the
higher.
current mill rate. So then I guess
Oh.
we have-
Correct.
That's an interesting thought,
You
though.
can't go higher
Yeah.
than that.
Okay, then,
What's approved.
then
and that's not-
ignore that.
So we have the. expense of another
So I was trying to avoid a.
No,
the expense of another
Yeah.
building.
The expense of another bill, but I guess we can't.
I think the system was designed.
Yeah, so
Go
we,
back to making the proposal of keeping the mill rate at, what is it?
39.43, correct? Jill, is our current mill rate?
39.43.
Yeah.
I make the motion.
Correct.
Do I have a second on, sorry, who said second? Charlie? Okay, I heard from that side of the table, but I wasn't looking, so. So Kristen made the motion to set the temporary mill rate to 39.43. Charlie seconded. Any further conversation? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? We have a temporary mill rate of 39.43.
Keep your eyes open for a supplemental bill. for property.
Yes,
And then people over-
and which brings us to our last item on our agenda, adjournment. I want to say thank you again to the board. Thank you to Laura for joining us and sharing your perspectives. Thanks to everyone for all of your hard work. It's fingers crossed. So Jill and I will work on the budget document, updating it. And I will work with Jim about emails, getting the email addresses fixed and posted and all of that. If you have any questions or concerns, I always email me. Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
We already did.
And put the signs back up.
And put the pink signs back. Thank you, Superintendent and Rhea, for joining us,
We love this.
and Amanda. Have a great evening.
Good night. Thank you.